Socrates. All I ask is that you think. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates. Welcome to Just My 3 Cents, where we make it make sense. Glad y'all could join us for our rapid fire new podcast. We've been rocking for a few weeks here, man. Definitely wanted to be a situation where we're interactive with you, the truth seekers out there listening. And so I'm going to jump this thing off and get right into it, where ultimately the goal is to basically raise the culture, just have nuanced discussions. I focus, again, I go by Black Socrates. And some of y'all know about, as you see behind my head, the Mental Dialogue Talk Show every Saturday morning, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But Just My 3 Cents is being brought to you. Let me shout out one institution. Want to thank those brothers over there for basically encouraging me to move to this medium. And also, I'd like to shout out one of my Queens of Intellect members from the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, Deasia Robertson, for also encouraging me to get on the video podcast. And so here we are. It's 30 minutes of rapid fire dialogue. And so without further ado, because we only got 30 minutes, we're going to get right into the discussion. Let me turn my air off. I didn't realize it was on. Hold on one second. I don't know if that's too loud for y'all. But either way, I wanted to basically jump right in, but just keep in mind, the way we're doing Just My 3 Cents, I'm going to lead with a discussion tonight is Black men and accountability, but you can jump in, add to the discussion. I got the link posted below here. I hope it's actually on the comments on YouTube and Facebook. I hope I did that correctly. I might have to go check that. As a matter of fact, I'll check it when I play this video. So we're going to lead off talking about Black men and accountability, but keep in mind, this is an interactive broadcast where you can participate, you can add to the current discussion, or bring up an entire different discussion. Again, I go by the name Black Socrates, so I can philosophize about whatever you may want to talk about. So we want it to be interactive. I don't want it to be you listening to me for 30 minutes. So I hope y'all will be willing to hit the link, but I'm going to play this video that, in a sense, gets us started. For anybody that may have seen the promotions for tonight, I basically said there's 3 areas that I was going to mention. And so the first one is there consequences to us as in Black men in particular, sowing our wild oats? Now, of course, this is something that is, broader than just Black men, if you will, but we are kind of trying to raise our culture. And so we're going to focus on Black men. And is there a consequence to us sowing our wild oats? So I wanted to play a clip from the Mental Dialogue Talk Show from a few weeks ago. This clip features Deasia Robertson as well as Coach D'Amicos from the Black Men and Cigars podcast. So if you'll just sit back, take in this clip, and we're going to dialogue about it, and hopefully some of y'all will be willing to jump on, and I'll make sure that the link is actually on Facebook and YouTube while this is playing. All right, here we go.
Know the distinction on whether men want a wife or not, because it's like a man will say he want a wife and know that he want his wife to be a modest woman, but then he will also date women who are not modest women, and then date women who are modest at the same time, and it's like he wants his cake and he wants to eat it too. So if a man has pure intentions on finding a wife, it's not so much as don't have sex. But the first thing first, if you're going to be having sex, the only women that you need to be having sex with, because you know at the end of the day you want her to be a modest woman, is the covered up woman or whatever the case may be. That should be for starters. But that doesn't actually end up necessarily being the case. And so that's the reason why I was just like, what is the real intent?
So let me throw this out too. So as I'm listening to you say that, Deasia, here's something to think about. Coach D'Amicos, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. So in the meantime, while sexing the women who are not fitting our category of wife, and again, that could vary for various men, is it possible that, again, I respect you and I know what your intentions are, and like you said, you're setting yourself up to, try to find a wife and have a family one day. You know how much I love that, because I encourage that highly in our community. But is it quite possible, when you go back to the earlier part of the show, talking about when you gave the examples of certain women being jaded and having to overcome, isn't it possible that you're one of those jaded men that was along the way, since you placed the woman in the sex only category and not in like as DH is saying, if you're playing around with women who are not fitting your category for wifey at the time that you're ready for a wife, isn't it possible that you are one of those jaded men that some of these other women experience? Because as I just heard DH break it down, I can see how that could be very confusing. If we're saying we want a wife and one thing, but we're chasing other things, and I've been guilty of that as well, so I can admit to that, then I can see how that can be super confusing. And in a sense, I'm chasing and playing over here, waiting for my wife. Well, I'm jading the women I'm chasing and playing with. I think that's what I hear her saying. Your thoughts on that, King?
Right. So yes, me included. We all have experiences that have shaped us to be different men than we were in our early 20s. Absolutely. I'm not abstaining from that at all. That's absolutely true. So, and the people, this is, but y'all say it's confusing.
So hopefully y'all were able to take in that cut. Again, just wanted to dialogue about what you're hearing there. I wanted to mention there was a couple of reasons why I chose to do this topic. Shout out to one of my longtime listeners who was saying, hey, we need to talk about Black men and accountability. And also another content creator that I really love, Chasing Yancey. She had mentioned this on her page, and I was like, you know what? Let's talk about this again. Our goal is to do nuanced discussions and raise the culture. And again, feel free to dialogue and jump in on the stream. Thank you, Leslie, for putting it on the Facebook page. I'm not sure if it's on the YouTube page, but I got it down here to below the screen. So hopefully y'all can hit that link if you want to join me this evening. But with that said, so Yancey just mentioned the idea of us as men who are quite often, we know in this culture, encouraged to sow our wild oats. And so in doing so, she kind of had a question where she just said that, hey, if you're doing that, it's kind of I don't know if I'm really doing a bad paraphrase of what she said, but this is really going to kick us off. So basically how after spending time doing that, when we go in a sense looking for a wife, having spent time in a sense just sowing our wild oats and discarding women, is kind of to a degree a little crazy to expect women to be trusting of you at that moment. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And that's what you heard in this dialogue. Again, this is actually from that cut you just heard comes from our actual Mental Dialogue talk show, where in a sense discussing wifey material or sex only. And so the key point, let me point out what the key point in that video was, the idea that even as men, similar to what Yancey asked on her page this week, that at the point in which we are in a sense tired of playing, because again, this society encouraged us to sow our wild oats. I'm guilty of it as well. But at the time that we're kind of tired of that, but ready to settle down, want to have a family. And so men do make a real big distinction on, in a sense, a woman that they see as wifey material versus someone that they will only have sex with. And that's what that show is about. However, when you get to the point when you're ready to be serious, and what we as men quite often say to our queens is that, you know, the woman that we're looking for with wifey material, we're always saying, well, we don't want her in a sense to treat us like the bad situation she's had in the past, because, you know, now we're mature, we're at the stage where we're not playing anymore, we're ready to get serious, we want to have a family. So when we're at that stage, we're really saying, hey, we don't want to get treated like or be held accountable or basically get in trouble for something that other men did in the past. And in this particular cut, what was highlighted, thanks to DeAsia kind of pointing it out, and I kind of piggybacked, was, well, while we're playing, we may be some of the men of some other woman's past that jaded her because we were playing, because the way men and women approach relationships, boyfriend and girlfriend relationships in particular, are so completely different that even with like my past, where I would be honest and upfront about my intentions, and a lot of times queens will tell you that that's what they're okay with. They you know, at least be up in front about your intentions. However, when you involve sex, then feelings obviously can get involved, and that can go both ways. It can happen to the man, it can happen to the woman. But even in establishing this is, in a sense, all this is, or what you call it, a friend with benefits or things of that nature. So even when you're up front, it's still, once feelings get involved, it can be bad experiences. So to the extent that even when a man comes along who has good intentions, then there's a lot of leeriness. And what happens is, again, when we mature and are above and beyond still just playing, we're upset with these women for being in a space where they're holding us accountable for what other men did. And because we're now have focused attention on having a wife, we missed the fact that we could have played a role in how these sisters are responding to us, even as men who are now, in a sense, mature and ready. So hope y'all got some thoughts on that. Matter of fact, I did, like I said, one of the questions I asked was this: are there some consequences? So I wanted to share one of the IG thoughts I got from Leslie as well. Let me share that. If anybody out there listening, please jump on. I don't want to be this 30 minutes of y'all just listening to me. She said major consequences to men just sowing their wild oats, or child support payments, child growing up without a father figure, angry moms, abortions. These are basically the results of us simply sowing our wild oats quite often. Now, I didn't have any babies while I was sowing my wild oats, but that's not normally how it goes, right? And so when you're in a space of not necessarily looking to have a family, these are some of the evident results of us sowing our wild oats. So even as men and as young boys, and Black men in particular, while being encouraged to sow our wild oats, then we talk about it in hip hop culture, obviously something else. And so we kind of do it almost unconscious of these real life results of us doing this, in a sense, before we mature past this, if you will. Matter of fact, I got Deasia trying to get on this thing with me, so I'm gonna go ahead and add her to the stream. Hey, what's up, Queen? How you doing?
Hey, Montoya, I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How you doing?
Doing good. Glad to get you on this thing. You know, I don't want to do this thing by myself, so appreciate you for supporting. Any thoughts about what I'm laying out right there?
I think that there are definitely consequences to a man sowing his wild oats if he do it too long and he live out like an extended adolescence, because you could run out of time. So I think that it's important to sow your wild oats because you need to get that all out your system, but it does need to be a stopping point where you like, hey, I'm gonna do this or whatever. And then I get to a certain point of time, I'm gonna go ahead and get somewhere and sit down. But you don't want to wait until you're too old to actually settle down, because, like you were saying, that Leslie said about some of the consequences that come with that, being on child support and all that old kinds of stuff that you end up having to deal with. And then also, not even that, from the financial aspect, you got to look at, probably just passing up some women that could have been your wife at the time when you were sowing your wild oats, missing out on those opportunities. And then now, it's hard to find somebody. You done got too old and things like that. So it's definitely consequences to it. But I don't think it's anything wrong with it either. But it just have to have a stopping point.
Well, like anything in life, right? There's typically the truth is not on the edges. So, so I respect what you're saying, like in the sense that to an extent, there is, there may be a benefit, or like say a young man getting that out of his system. I think that is something that there's value in a young man getting that out of the system as well. And so definitely don't recommend necessarily that sisters link up with too many young men, because most are not going to be mature enough or ready for it if in a sense they hadn't got some of that out of their system. But like you said, the other end of it is aging out, even for men, even though that's not how it's thought of, to a degree, that sometimes can be at risk. And in the past, when we talk about the concept of raising the culture, in the past, there was culturally a time where even other men would look to men and say, hey, what you doing now, bro? How long you gonna be out there? Like that was a part of the culture. And so now I think to a degree, due to so many years of not, in a sense, having, if you will, enough fathers, in a sense, in our community raising the culture, that part has been lost. So that's where, in my opinion, you do get that extended adolescence. That's a mistake that I personally can admit I've made. And so the efforts I do with Mental Dialogue and this show right here is to ensure that other young men don't follow in that footsteps. Now, I can still have children, if you will. So it's not like I can't still win, if you will, but I wouldn't recommend young men not getting serious much sooner because they lived out an extended adolescence, unfortunately, because there's not a lot of people in the culture telling them to do otherwise. So that's the point, in my opinion. The reasons we should even have these dialogues is because if we're going to raise the culture, we have to put in perspective how that's not a benefit. And then the last thing I would like to just have you talk on, because you made this point in that cut, is just the idea of us as men not recognizing that quite often once we mature and now we're ready to be, in a sense, a good man and a good, like some of the men that get to that point, we miss out on that. Sometimes we were the jaded men in those women's lives when we were playing. So when we say there's nothing wrong with it, there's still consequences even from that standpoint. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that, Queen, because again, you brought that point to that show.
Yeah, you do stand the risk of hurting a whole lot of women, and you end up playing a part in your demise, because once you get done and you get to the point where you're ready to settle down, and you get to a certain age, you got all these women with all of this baggage, this hurt, this pain that you got to help her unpack or whatever, and it was because of guys like you. When you were sowing your wild oats, so now you gotta all that come around full circle. So now you gotta deal with, the same type of energy that you had put out before in the past, which you probably didn't go in. I'm sure a lot of guys are not doing it with ill intent. I don't think that, but it ends up hitting you in your face once you get older and you're looking for somebody to settle down with. And then a lot of the blame get placed on the woman. Like, oh, she needs to heal and she needs to do this, that, and the third, and the whole time. And you're like, I'm a good guy. I'm the good guy. And I don't want to have to make up for what these men did. But once upon a time, you weren't always the good guy.
Hey, guilty as charged. And that's the whole point of this, doing this part, was becoming aware of, even unintentionally, how that can be the consequence. And so the same women that you're worried about holding you accountable for something somebody else does, you don't think about you were in that role for some other woman that you let go or possibly hurt unintentionally. You decided you could start it out. I used to be that, tell you up front what I wanted, and then still sometimes she get attached. It happened to me. I got attached, vice versa, even though we started out. So it can go both ways, but you end up being that reason. So I wanted to point that out. Let me share this other clip. I'm glad to have you on. For anybody else that wants to be like DeAsia, please hit the clip below, because we're keeping this thing running. I'm going to play another cut, still talking about black men and accountability. Play this real quick.
For men, real quick. What do another man have to do to a woman in front of you for you to hold them accountable? Because I just saw a video of one of the women I follow talking about her deadbeat baby father. And the motherfucker talking about you picked him. You think when they met, he was like, if we have kids, I'm going to be a deadbeat and leave and shit? Or do you think he probably was telling her you want to be a father, like his father wasn't for him and shit like that? It seemed like all women problems come from daddy issues, and it seemed like definitely all the men problems come from daddy issues. It seemed like the common denominator is men. I feel like motherfuckers jump hurdles and drive around all type of shit just to not hold men accountable. So I ask again, what does a man have to do to a woman in front of you?
All right, Queen, I wanted to bring you back on because I want to go at this one. I want to we want to get into nuance. And this is actually, again, what sparked me to even consider doing this particular show, because one of my longtime listeners says, hey, we need to talk about this. And this is someone that I've had dialogue with. And when you hear it at surface, it seems like it makes a lot of sense. But as we always do with Mental Dialogue, we're going to do it here just my 3 cents. I want to get into this nuance that I think often gets missed, even by the person that did this video, right? Saying, just kind of, he put in that perspective. here's the what I think is the unfortunate reality. Want to hear your thoughts on this? But the unfortunate reality, even for the brother who says, Montoya, this is what we need to talk about. So I played the video, and he's a big brother. He's a brother that's adamant that men need to be talking like this. Here's an unfortunate reality. It's going to sound like an excuse. Again, we go. I hope people have an open mind, but we have nuance that people are usually not really willing to consider. So if I could talk to the brother who sent me that video, and I've said this to him in the past, I'm going to say it to everybody here because it's the nuance. I've said this to him many times. If we were to, and we're doing it right now, we do this dialogue about this video. Let's say we made some big promotion, or there was going to be an event here in Atlanta talking about holding black men accountable. The reality is the black men who are not accountable, they're never going to show up to that discussion because they're living a life where they don't want accountability. And so having the discussion will be a bunch of men who pretty much hold themselves accountable, agreeing we need to hold other men accountable, but we're literally going to be in the room talking to the choir. And I say this, DeAsia, because here's what the brother that sent this to me, and I know this to be the case amongst other brothers who, like we talked about earlier, you mature to the point where I'm the good guy, right? When you reach that point in your life, your circle is other men who hold one another accountable. So quite often we're being told by our queens, black men need to hold each other accountable without realizing we're literally all in water in real life. There are no scenarios in which accountable men and unaccountable men congregate, believe it or not. Give me a quick thought on that. So I'm gonna tell you.
I could definitely understand that, but I actually feel like with the accountability thing in this particular scenario, it doesn't necessarily have to be any direct accountability where you actually have to talk to the guys. It's more so what I got from that video when it came to accountability is to be aware and acknowledge the fact that these women that are damaged or have experienced certain things, like, don't try to make it seem like it's her fault or she just picked wrong or whatever. Like, if you encounter a woman that, you know, she's maybe broken or whatever the case may be, or she might have her guard up, what I took from it is look at the fact that there were men in her life that came along that manipulated her, because no woman is just going to just be with a man and he being a dog just straight out the gate. They gonna sell us these wood nickels and tell us these sweet nothings and all of that. And it ain't until we too far in that we find out that he ain't worth a damn. And then next thing you know, we're heartbroken and things like that. So I think from that aspect is to, like, don't like switch the blame or victim blame or anything, but understand that what has happened is part of something that a man has done to this woman. That's what I got from it, because I know men who are not responsible. And I ain't trying to even be responsible. I ain't trying to change. Of course, they're not going to be around guys who are responsible to hear anything. And at a certain age, you can't teach these old dogs new tricks anyway. But all at the same time, it's just to be more aware when you're actually interacting with a woman. I that's what I took from it.
Right. So quite often the challenge is for us to address those unaccountable men. I'm gonna give you an example of something that happened in the barbershop this weekend, and it just so happened, this week actually, and it just so happened to happen right before this show. I want to show you how, in a sense, men handle that same discussion. So just like I said, this just so happened to happen. So young brother, cuts my hair, he does a great job or whatever. And so I've only been to this shop a couple times. And so, it's a barbershop talk. So, since you ain't been there a couple times, I got to ease myself in, because I'm going to start going there on a regular basis. So I can't just jump too hard in. But at the time, they were in there dialoguing. And the older brothers was telling the young man, they were saying, hey, man, sometimes better that you just be friends with your baby mother than continuing to try to make it work. And so I'm just sitting there listening to, I've been in there a couple times. And so they, and the brother is saying, my children are young. This is the younger brother saying this to the older brothers. My children are young. I want to be there at least for a certain amount of time. And in his heart, I could tell he really wants it to make it work too. But where he was laying the dialogue for them was, my children are young. And I was like, well, so I asked, how old are the children? I was, how long you been with the lady? He said a few years. He had a 2-year-old and just had a newborn, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as I keep listening, I'm like, dang, why they telling this dude? You know what I mean? And so eventually I pipe up. I'm ready to try to see if I can fit in without, coming off wrong. So I say, man, clearly I don't know what's going on in the situation to, for y'all to be encouraging him to step out of the situation. I say, from my perspective, not knowing the whole situation, seeing like he got at least 2 good reasons to stick this thing out. Cause I'm impressed. The young buck is standing up to them saying, I'm trying to stay. And I say, so he got 2 good reasons to stay. And the older cat say, man, you're right. You don't know her. She was just on the top of the roof of his car trying to bust his windows out just a week ago. And I'm like, oh, okay. You know what I'm saying? So, obviously, I figured I didn't know it was going to be that. But I know it's got to be some context why these older brothers are trying to tell him it may be better as friends than trying to make it work. And so I'm like, wow, that's a crazy situation or whatever. And I will say the young man had led with, before they got into that dialogue, that his baby mama crazy. He had led with that before the dialogue went as far as it went. So now I'm putting 2 and 2 together, and I say, well, yeah, clearly there's more to it than that. And I say, and so now just throwing the dialogue out there, and I knew, and I say, bro, you knew she was like that, and you put a second one in her. So I'm just easing myself in there, but it's just something to think about. You know she's like that, and you put a second one in her. So amongst men, that's why our way of saying you're choosing her, like men talk like that to one another. I'm not making it necessarily saying it's right when we do it to ladies, but I'm just kind of letting you know the insight to how men speak to one another. So sometimes we're delivering it, not realizing how y'all are receiving it, because amongst one another, that's the accountability. Not only did I say you knew she was like that and you put a second one in her, then the brother across the in the barbershop goes, he was like, this is what he said, I'm just keeping it a buck. He was like, the ones with the best pussy, the craziest ones. That's what the brother says, right? Then he goes, I remember when I made the same mistake with this stripper in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So the brother that said that was the first one to say that sometimes it's better for you to be apart than to be together to make it work for your children. That's what he was telling the young man. Because then I understood he was telling them because that was his firsthand experience. So that was the brother's way of saying, don't try to fight for this thing with somebody that's like her, because I made that mistake. I didn't know it until that moment. So he basically was encouraging him because he's watching, in his opinion, this young man go down the same path and make the same mistake he had made. So the accountability was get away and choose better. Like that's what men say to one another. So it's just some insight on how men check each other that exact same way. Just throwing it out there. We only got a couple of minutes. Just wanted your thoughts on it, Queen.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. And I have seen cases where men have checked each other, like how you said, because I used to get my hair cut short and I'd be at barbershops and hear the conversations. I was just like the fly on the wall or whatever. So I do understand that it happens. Everything that happens in a relationship, other men are not going to be able to hold another man's hand and walk him through every single thing. And like I said, going back to your point about sowing your wild oats or whatever the case may be, sometimes there just might be just collateral damage or whatever and no ill intent. And so it's good to have those types of conversations that was like at the barbershop or whatever. But in his particular case, he should have known better. In this case, she was the crazy one. He wasn't. He seemed like he's sober-minded.
But I want you to think about what you just said, because we only got a minute, because I'm going to get up, move on. So if you think about what you just said, that's what men are quite often saying to women. You know what I'm saying? That dude was crazy versus me. And then we're basically saying to that guy, you chose this crazy girl. We're saying
right, but that doesn't mean that you don't get damaged from it. Just because he made the choice and he chose the crazy girl, you get damaged from it. That's just like if I get damaged by a man, yeah, I chose to be with that man, but he could hurt me and I could leave right after he hurt me. It don't mean that the woman just stay in the situation and continue to get hurt. Once you hurt, you're hurt.
Nobody's suggesting that. Nobody's suggesting that. And we definitely understand that he's hurt. That's why those men are saying you might want to move on before it continues being some level of hurt. And I'm not saying what decision he should make. I love the fact that the young man said, I want to figure out how to be there for my children. I don't, based on what I heard, I don't know if he's going to be able to make it. Even he worried about whether they're going to be able to make it. I'm just pointing out that the way we checked him was just simply to say you chose that, but that's not saying that he's not hurt. That's just the way that men check one another. So when I'm just pointing out that that's what, so we check one another with, damn, you chose her. Like that's what we say. So it was like, we do go by who you chose.
Yeah. Can I ask you a real quick question quick? When you was out sowing your wild oats, you said that you was an honest guy. You weren't out trying to hurt a woman or anything or whatever. But I'm sure women got hurt by you. So you weren't a bad guy, but she still got hurt by you. So it ain't like she chose a bad person, but she still got hurt. So a lot of times when y'all point the finger and be like, well, you chose him or whatever the case may be, that don't mean that he presented as a bad person, that this woman ended up being hurt. And I think that's the part that y'all don't get sometimes.
Yeah, I respect it. I respect that. Well, yeah, we are at the end of the broadcast. We're going to keep it at 30 minutes. Thank you, Queen, for jumping on this thing with me. I'm going to play another cut that kind of speaks to ultimately what I always push, which is healthy marriage before children. So I'm going to play this cut to give perspectives when we talk about holding these black men accountable. There's a perspective that, in a sense, we don't just become men on our own. You, in a sense, have to be raised in manhood. So when you hear this perspective from Mediate, let me make sure I say it right. Hold on. I want to give them credit. Mediocre Tutorials and Review, MTR. It's just a quick cut I'm going to play, and it breaks down ultimately what I agree that we should be striving for, and then what happens for us as men and women, but particularly this conversation about men, when we don't heal from our hurt, regardless of how it comes, we're really not going to be any count for our seeds. So hope y'all enjoy this cut. Once that cut goes off, I'm going to read an excerpt from my upcoming book, Just My 3 Cents, and we off this thing. Thank you, Queen, for joining me. All
right, thanks for having me. Have a good one.
All right, absolutely.
All right.
When you're judged off of essentially your usefulness and your utility within the world, right? And it's one thing if you come from a healed background where you've had a fantastic network around you, right? Where people can understand who you are as a person and discipline the bad behaviors and attitudes out of you so you could take full accountability and responsibility for all the decisions that you are making and within your life, so much that you can give back to the next elk and the next crop of the youngins that are coming up. But if you came from toxicity, if you came from torture, if you have trauma as a man that you have not solved for, if you've been through emotional abuse, there is no way you can be your most optimal to be of good use and utility to the world.
All right. And we always close the show again with a piece from an upcoming book. This is Just My 3 Cents on Race, Sex, and Culture, Necessary Conversations. It is an interactive conversation dialogue book. So you'll read pieces like this and dialogue with others about it. Tonight's piece is called Black Socrates Speaks to Black Men. To all black men, first and foremost, we would do ourselves a favor to stop arguing over who has it worse in America between the black man and black woman, especially since America still has its foot on both of our necks. However, black men in general, we must become acutely aware of how we've adopted behaviors that do not value the black woman for the goddess she is. If we are very honest, the majority of black women have stood with us historically and currently, at least until the recent gender wars have brought this into question. Yes, more of our queens seem to be falling for this divisive rhetoric, but black men, it is our failure to honor and protect our women in the first place that gave a gateway to this environment. I'm not pointing the finger, but I am speaking reality to the responsibility we as black kings must take to turn this around. I am guilty, as most of us are, but kings feeling unsupported by our queens is a weak position to take. And when we choose this position, the question becomes, how can we find value in our queens? Unfortunately, any man settling in this position will probably never see the true value of the black woman and therefore fail to ever enter a healthy marriage with one, if at all. Although the increasing numbers of men taking this position results from the lack of natural families in the Black community over the past 60 years. As a community, we must remember for all of our efforts to improve our collective economics, education, mental and physical health, etc., it is all for naught until we fix the basic relationship between the Black man and woman. The cornerstone of strong communities are strong families, period. The first step is for kings to respect and protect all queens as if they were their own sisters and mothers. They are worthy of respect and adulation, regardless of how they may carry themselves, simply because they are the givers of life. Although I must say to the queens, there is a great deal of power in how you carry yourselves that will make us kings fall in line and protect you. I understand the rhetoric out there that says respect women no matter how they act, but like it or not, that rhetoric refuses to recognize how men and women in general are wired differently, and this has nothing to do with social constructs. Like I always tell my closest sisters when they seek my advice on men, I ask, do you want to discuss how men should be, or do you want the reality of how men truly are? My name is Black Socrates, and I've spoken the truth as I know it. All I ask is that you think. All right, y'all, we're raising the culture. Make it make sense. See y'all next Wednesday.